U.S. Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats says the alleged attempts to interfere in this year's elections are not as, quote, intense as those the intelligence community observed in 2016. But in the wake of the U.S. intelligence community's conclusion that Moscow did in fact meddle in the 2016 presidential race, the White House is looking to prove it is protecting the next major round of voting this November. U.S. President Donald Trump has now signed an executive order which allows Washington to sanction individuals or companies that are conclusively linked to attempts to influence American elections, either by hacking into election systems or by spreading propaganda to influence voters. Russian President Vladimir Putin denies that Moscow attempted to interfere in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. President Trump refused to confront him on the issue when the two met in Helsinki. And yet, the Mueller probe continues to investigate possible ties between the Trump campaign and Moscow. So there is pressure on the Trump administration to ensure the November elections are free of interference. And just last month, Coats said there is reason to be concerned.
The intelligence community continues to be concerned about the threats of upcoming U.S. elections, both the midterms and the presidential elections of 2020. In regards to Russian involvement in the midterm elections, we continue to see a pervasive messaging campaign by Russia to try to weaken and divide the United States.
Director Coats says Washington is also monitoring China, the DPRK, and Iran because he says they too have the capabilities to interfere in U.S. elections, although he provided no evidence, and none of those countries have certainly admitted to doing so. Now, there also is this question of why now, and one of the reasons is, of course, that the administration says it wants to have these kinds of tools ahead of the election. But another reason is that lawmakers on Capitol Hill have already been working on a legislative way to force sanctions if, in fact, there are proven cases of election interference in the November elections. And one of the main skeptics for the president, Chuck Schumer, a leading Senate Democrat, had this to say, quote, "Given what the president did in Helsinki, giving himself the option of levying tough sanctions is hardly reassuring." It's worth noting that Facebook, Google, and Twitter have all announced that they've shut down hundreds of accounts believed linked to influence campaigns backed by Iran and Russia. Jessica Stone, CGTN, Washington.